Okay, Nick and Andy, we need to talk about Manchester City, obviously knocked out of the Champions League by Real Madrid in pretty embarrassing, demoralizing fashion, I'd say, if you're Man City and you've been so good for the last, decade or so now. Nick, I mean, they're struggling with confidence. We can clearly see that. Is it too simple to say this is the end of an era? Because there's already kind of the noises coming out of Man City. We feel like we've been feeling this way for most of the season, but this result against Real Madrid and being out of the Champions League this early just kind of underlines everything and says, yeah, it probably is the end of the road for this team, and there's a huge rebuild coming up.
Yeah, I have an imperfect analogy, an imperfect comparison. So whether you want to pick a movie star like Robert De Niro, or you want to pick a musician, a band you love, I don't know, Jimmy Eat World, it feels to me like there's still a chance that this is just a really bad record they made or a really bad film that they made, and let's see what the next thing they do. It's imperfect because there are so many players here. It's not the same band going back into the studio. So I get that but Pep Guardiola is still the producer. To me, he is still the orchestrator here. We have almost never seen him put a bad team out there, and it does feel a little bit like a perfect storm. And there was a time we have a group chat to go behind the curtain. And during the Champions League, I was conversing with Andy, and he said something just, it's hard to believe how bad they are. And it connected with me that I think we're looking at a team that we can't help but watch through the goggles of their very best. And so I think they kind of look like a lot of other teams right now. But because we've seen them be better than anyone else, it looks like they're absolute trash. So can they recover this season? Yeah, I mean, they can win a trophy. They can slot in some guys early, but it's not going to be City.
Yeah, it's true, right? I mean, Nick's right, Andy. They could win the FA Cup. They could easily finish third in the Premier League, given their uptick in results in recent weeks. And everything that's happened, you'd be like, maybe that's acceptable. Maybe that's acceptable. But I guess long term, like how damaging do you think this season could be? Because we're seeing obviously Kyle Walker's left. We're seeing Kevin De Bruyne, Bernardo Silva, Gundogan coming back, all kind of going over that hill at the same time. Even someone like Edison, who previously was incredible, is having a down season. It seems like there really is a total rebuild to happen. And it's the same problems coming up for City throughout this season. Injuries aside, that shows you that something needs to change pretty drastically for them to get back on track for next season and beyond.
Yeah. Did this happen overnight, or did we just kind of ignore when this was happening over the course of a couple years, where it was becoming clear because De Bruyne has had a couple of longer term injuries that he was starting to break down just a little bit. He's played a ton of minutes and a ton of high level games over the last decade, and that's going to happen. And if you just kind of look down the rest of the squad here, I'm looking at the team that played Liverpool earlier in the season, because they've got them coming up this weekend. Kyle Walker was in there, Akanji, Ake, Gundogan, Bernardo Silva. These are all players over 30 years old, and they went into the season relying heavily on them to be healthy and fit for the entirety of the season. That's not realistic. Then you throw De Bruyne in there. Really the only couple of players that are the age profile that I think you would want them to be in the squad right now, Haaland and Foden. And everybody else is either a developmental new signing, somebody that you hope is going to blossom into something more, or somebody that's probably a little bit past it. And so it's not a surprise that we keep seeing John Stones, unfortunately, go down injured. And he's become so important to that team since Rodri went out injured, who's approaching 30 now. So maybe we ignored it a little bit because the greatness was so good, as Nick says, that they were still able to push through and win 4 straight titles during that period. But it does feel like Pep has, I don't know, was he riding the gravy train a little bit too hard and maybe wasn't paying attention to, what was coming around the corner?
Potentially. It happens though, right, Nick? Like Arsenal, they're a great team. Man United after Fergie left, and just like Andy said, riding those guys that have been so successful for so long individually, but as a group and a unit, and they always figured it out, always won the titles, always won the big trophies. Can you blame them for getting into this situation? It's kind of like 50-50, right?
I actually can't. I'll be honest with you, and I'm not trying to be an apologist. I can't blame them for getting in this situation. I think they did ride Kyle Walker too long. We know that. So there are instances where this was a problem. Would these purchases they made in January have been better made in August? Yes, but how much of that is retrospect? The best all-around footballer in the world suffered a season-ending injury. It is going to be challenging. If that happened to Erling Haaland, we would be talking about, man, their goals are a bit down. And I just think we're comparing them to a difficult standard. And again, I don't want to lean too much on that point. But if I were to walk up to you with their stats of this year in a vacuum and said, hey, in open play, they've taken 315 shots and they've allowed 194. In open play, they have produced 120 more shots. They've only gotten 2 penalties and given away 3. But last year it was 524, and they only gave up 226, which means they're giving up more. They're just not as clinical in the box. And why is that? Well, their wings are not all of but their wings are new. I mean, Savio has had some moments, right? But he's still adjusting. And what was the point we made for pretty much everybody but Haaland and Vardiol? It takes some time to get to know Pep. So if
they're mistake prone as well, like they make a ton of individual mistakes that cost them.
I think a lot of that is Rodri. He's the best player in the world last year, maybe for the last 2 years. Gone.
So, I mean, talking about one of the other best players in the world, Erling Haaland, I just wonder, obviously signed that incredible lengthy contract, Andy. But seeing this happening around him right now very quickly, do you think this kind of impacts his long-term ambition? Of course, we know the verdict's expected soon on the Premier League charges, and whatever's going to happen after that will be the fallout. But do you think kind of, in my head, I was watching them kind of just be dismantled by Real Madrid and thinking, if I'm Erling Haaland and I'm going to spend the next 4 or 5 years of my prime at Man City, I would be quite jealous looking at Real Madrid, who are always going to be up there with the challengers, whereas it seems now he's going to be the focal point of this huge rebuild, and it may not ever be as good at City as it was in his first couple of years there. So I don't know. I just was wondering about his like long-term ambition and future at Man City. And again, there's a lot of spinning plates, like I said, on and off the pitch here.
I'll answer your question with a question. What is Pep's ambition? I think that probably answers a lot of it. Obviously, he's signed through 2027. And so if he's there that long, what happens after that then? We know that Can Pep build another great team? Yeah, of course he can. He's Pep. But doing it in practice, doing it in the real world is a little bit more difficult. It does help that you've got that centerpiece right there, and it will not be difficult, I don't think. The money obviously helps, but to recruit players to say, hey, you want to come play with Erling Haaland, maybe the greatest, most talented and physical striker that has ever existed, I think they'll be able to put together a good squad. It's just about how, to me, the real question is, how long does Pep want to do this? Because Pep looks tired right now, and I know this season has been tough, and any manager would look like that at this point of the season. But again, to go back to the point I made earlier, he's kind of looked tired the last couple years as well. And so what is his ambition going to be? I think those two probably are going to be pretty closely tied, Pep's decision to Erling's decision.
Yeah, some really interesting times coming up in Man City. And, let's see how they get on against Liverpool this weekend. And there is the opportunity for them to finish the Premier League season very strong. And it felt to me almost as a bit of relief from City that they're out of the Champions League now, focus on the league, FA Cup, get to the end of the season. Oh, yeah, we've got the Club World Cup in the US this summer as well. So it just keeps on going. But I do feel like there's a huge discussion we're going to keep having with Man City for the following months and years about the rebuild, the quality of players, the amount of money they're going to have to pay to get anywhere close to what we've seen over the last few seasons. And it's going to be really interesting on and off the pitch for City in the years to come.
Hi, I'm Rebecca Lowe, and as we head towards the end of an exciting Premier League season, make sure you like and subscribe on the NBC Sports YouTube channel for more content like this.